So can you give me a little background information on the war in Uganda?
Yeah, there's been a civil war in Uganda that's gone on for parts of 3 decades now. A lot of it is hard to track, like the origins of it. Generally, the North has been under the affliction of a rebel leader named Joseph Kony, who is from the Acholi tribe, and he supposedly is trying to overthrow the Ugandan government and to create a government based on the Ten Commandments. The problem with that is that he has systematically destroyed his own people, the Acholi, stolen the children from the villages, and if they're boys, they're forced to be child soldiers, and if they're girls, they're forced to be sex slaves. And this has gone on for almost 3 decades now. As it stands right now, there's a ceasefire in Uganda that's held for almost 2 years, and Kony is now he's camped out in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is next to Uganda, but he's doing his raids in the Central African Republic. And they always do them on foot, so they're hard to track. They'll show up in a village, take whatever the harvest is, along with anything that's valuable, and then also young boys anywhere from 8 to 11 years old, and girls of that age as well. He's not been caught. He's the first war criminal that The Hague is trying to prosecute as a war criminal, but he's hiding out in the jungle and no one's caught him. So that's generally what's gone on in northern Uganda for the last forever.
And you visited there last summer, correct?
Yeah, I was able to go there for about 2 weeks, and we went in several different places in northern Uganda, some that were just a few kilometers from where he grew up, definitely parts that had been destroyed by civil war, so I got to see all that firsthand.
And you always tell a story about a certain prayer that you were involved in with a group.
There was this one village that was only 5 kilometers from where Kony grew up, and earlier in the day they'd walked us through the whole village and showed us where certain break-ins and burglaries had happened. They showed us where the jungle was that they would run and hide at with their children and their families. They would show us the trees where certain people had been tied to and executed. So it was a very personal account of what had happened, and that was very difficult. And there was definitely a lot of emotion because the most violent things that could happen to people were happening and had become a normal part of their history and their village. And so at the end of the day, we gathered together with them, the men and women and the children of this village, maybe 100 people, and they had a prayer service, just a short time of prayer. And they started off by praying for rain, which sounds really silly, but they had been through 2 seasons of drought and were starving to death. And so the prayer for rain was very much more important. But then they actually started praying for Joseph Kony, and they prayed that God would save him, that God would redeem him, that he would see the error in his ways, and that he would give up the battle, give up the war. And that was one of the most profound experiences in my life, because it's one thing to pray for your enemy, your coworker at work who stole your cinnamon roll out of the refrigerator. That's one thing, but to pray for the guy who has stolen your children, who has ransacked your village, that's deeply personal and very intimate, and so to be involved in something like that was incredible.
What is your general stance on war?
As a Christian, as a follower of Christ, someone who takes the words of Jesus very literally, I'm opposed to war. I realize that that's not a very popular opinion in the Christian church in America, but I can't read what Jesus said about blessing those who curse you and forgiving people, and if someone steals your shirt, give them your coat as well. I can't read those things and still believe in war. So I'm against war.
And the Old Testament, there's a lot of war in the Old Testament.
Right.
Where do you bind the Old Testament teaching and New Testament teachings?
Well, there's definitely a lot of violence in the Old Testament. I'd say most of it is pretty violent. The best way that I can reason with it is that the Old Testament was an imperfect system that didn't work. Um, we are incapable of connecting to God without intervention from Jesus, and so I see Jesus replacing that old way of living. Uh, and so at the point where Jesus came and lived on earth and gave us rules to live by, not rules per se, but guidance to live by, and then live them out on his own, um, for me that supersedes what happened in the Old Testament. So that's how I reconcile the two. But there's definitely an awkwardness to it. There's a lot of violence in the Old Testament, but there was no violence in the life of Christ. He Violence was enacted upon him, but he didn't respond with violence. Even when the Apostle Peter lunges and grabs the guard's sword and cuts off his ear, Jesus is very critical of that act and actually repairs the ear. So Jesus' life was marked by nonviolence. But at the same time, I don't think you could call it pacifism, because he was very involved in change, and he was very passionate, he was very vocal. He wasn't a pushover or anything like that. So that's how I feel about it.